Thank you. Ms. Mthembu, it's over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Gumede, with the Director for Programs. Morning to the panelists and morning to the participants of this webinar. My name is Sithembiso Mthembu, also known by Promise. I am a gender activist or a scholar. I've worked in many organizations and initiatives that look at gender issues, basically looking at issues of economic development, social development, political, development and participation from a woman's lens, or what I would call a feminist lens. And I'm currently associated with the School of Gender Studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And my day job is with the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability in the presidency in Pretoria. But I am here in my individual capacity. I'm looking forward to working and learning from you today. Thank you.
Before you disappear, can I request that you just give us your initial thoughts on the topic for today?
Okay, so my initial thoughts, looking at equality of access as a human right. Yes, indeed, it is a human right, as enshrined in the Constitution and in international law, and our economic participation and development commitments as a country. But also gender commitments as a country. However, when we talk the language of human rights, we talk the language of access, this suggesting that human rights are not a guarantee, and that special measures have to be taken for human rights of people to be realized. And when you talk access, you then bring issues of class, in our context, race, and also gender, and also physical abilities, and also access to power. What you will then see is that, the rights in a way become privileges, because people who are at bottom ladder of society, women, young people, people with, less abilities will not necessarily have access. And also, if you look at the structural, how the structure of the South African economy, was designed in the past. It was not designed, for the majority, and by its very nature, it was extractive. You therefore have the transition, where all who live in South Africa are supposed to have a piece of the pie. Then it becomes, really, difficult, because what happens in the transition is that you change the racial makeup of the the economy, as a system. And also, when you change the racial makeup, you do it gradually, right? So you get participation of a particular segment of society, and the initial extractive economy, it was designed, for about 3 to 4 million, people, who were like white, mostly male Afrikaners. Then you have, in 1994, for an example, a population of around 40 million, and now we're sitting with a population of about 60 million, and it's really, and it has not been possible to design or to bake this pie, for everyone. So in abstract, at an academic level, scholarly level, it is for all, but at practical level, not at this point, but there are opportunities to expand that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vela. I will now go alphabetical and see if Umanyosi Mbatha can be the next one to introduce himself and give us his initial thoughts. Manyosi, Mr. Mbatha.
Baba Pagatswayo. I hope I am audible.
Siyakuzwa kodwa sikubona sicela nokukubona.
Oh, aningiboni. I was hoping. Thank you, Pagatai. Thank you, Mgun. Thank you so much. Good morning to everybody that is available on this webinar. My name is Buhlebenkosi Mbatha, but I go as BMJ. I am the creative director for a company called Profound Resolutions, at which we specialize in brand communications, marketing, and digital innovations. But again, I appear here in different capacities because I am a very strong, opinionated person when it comes to agriculture, as well as socio-economic development in the rural spaces more especially. Ngihlala endaweni ezihlukene ke, from Ulundi to Mandeni to Durban. I'm also a part-time goat farmer, which akungisondeza kakhulu kwezomhlaba. So that's why I'm saying that I'm a very outspoken person when it comes to having young people getting into the space of farming as well as owning land. I'm also part of a movement called Amandla Omnotho, with which Mr. Gugulethu Xaba is the head and the face of it. So I assist in branding and marketing for that movement, ikakhulukazi le movement that is centered on empowering Black people to get into the space of being partakers in the economy at large. So going back, I'm so happy to hear Miss Mthembu touch on so many aspects with regards to touching such a very critical discussion when it comes to having the same ability, having access to the essentials that we need as citizens. I take note of so many points that she mentioned, which is very true. As a country, we are 27 years old as a democratic country, which gives a space of so much growth. But as a country, we have so many beautiful and well-articulated policies. I think constitution, if you look at our constitution, we have one of the most brilliant forms of constitutions from all over the world. If you can compare it to all over the world, if you look at inclusivity and how it allows everybody to have a piece of the pie, as she has placed, Noma has said. But honestly, practically, we should look at that much more closer with, is it really practical? After 27 years, there are still places that still do not have access to clean water. After 27 years, we still have problems at which you ask yourself, should we still be having such problems with such a beautiful and well-articulated policy and policies in place? This discussion in generally is really, I'm more excited to hear our viewpoints of such key well-spoken people and people that I look up to have their way of sharing their opinions, more than I'm really looking forward to hear myself speak. But more especially, I think I'm coming from a younger perspective, a much needed perspective going to the future, because we are the ones, Baba Mnguni, that are going to be taking everything from you.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So Mnguni, what did you do with the land? What did you do with the mines? What happened to the banks? What happened to all of these things that supposedly we are supposed to be having the same access to, as much as laba abanye esingathi baningi banamandla kuzo have? So I'm really looking forward to this engagement. I'm really looking forward to learning. And yeah, that's that. Thank you so much.
Nonkosi, you were saving the best for last. I've seen a bit of you on YouTube, so I hope will also mesmerize us. Of you're on the floor, sir.
Moderator, first of all, pardon me for not having my picture clear. I messed it up when I was trying to get the drop down thing. So even now I've got this video open, but you can't see me. But I don't want to waste any more time trying to fiddle with this technology. And I'm using the gadget I'm not familiar with. Thank you, Program Director, and greetings to everybody, including our dear panelists, as well as the viewers, wherever they may be, Facebook and other media. Thank you. So my opening, firstly, as a way of introduction, Gugulethu Xaba, I hail from KwaNongoma, Northern KwaZulu-Natal. I live in Johannesburg for over 2 decades now. I come from the background of electrical engineering, and having done quite a few or have gone through different companies, over 10 years, opened my company that is involved in enterprise development, of which I am the head, Adamo Peaks or Adamo Holdings group of companies. I run a program called Amandla Omnotho, which is the organization I founded under Lighthouse Economic Development Institute. It deals with issues of economic development. As Mr. Mbatha has said, I work with Ushandu as one of the young persons to drive matters of social economy. I'm more of a socio-economic activist as well as an entrepreneur. I have a radio show on Ukhozi FM and as well as on Galaxy, where we broadcast, even though Galaxy for now, we've just put it on a hold whilst we're looking for sponsorship. So that is in a nutshell who am I, Phakathwayo. My opening remarks really around this topic. I want to first agree and confirm the hypothesis, Mr. Moderator, and I really believe that equality of access is and should be a human right. Our first panelist spoke, Ms. Mthembu, about the extractive nature of our economic system. I would like to agree with that, but citing 3 points from my opening remarks as being, I think, in my mind, the points that needs to be looked into rather closely for us to achieve this ideal which we are talking about of the access of all these very important fundamentals and rights. One, I agree that we are in the extractive economic system. You know, that talks to the foundation of this country and what needs to be done to it, to tinker with the sort of the foundation so that it opens up to be accommodative of a number of people who are still outside this as a right. It's a right for us to have access, and based on our abilities and our entrepreneurial view and our entrepreneurial spirit, we then ought to exploit this. But the extractive nature of a system is in such a way that it continues to favor those that have been part of the system. And it continues to favor their growth. It continues to favor them from the wide variety of issues, especially when we look at it from the economic angle, which is what I would like us to explore as we go down, seeing that this virtual seminar is more focused towards youth and women. So I agree on the extractive nature of the economic system. Secondly, the non-participants or non-participation by largely young people in the economic system, and them not being activists and active citizens, and perhaps not understanding how they need to position themselves to this very extractive system of economy, so that they put pressure and make sure that it opens up, because nobody is going to do it. This is not going to be an osmosis process where things happen all by themselves because there's a free movement of air. This is going to be a process that must be driven by people who are clear, first, who understand the system, because you cannot attend to a problem that you don't understand. Read, understand it, and attend to it and say, what exactly do we need to do here? I'll make an example. Yesterday was a great launch of the YWBN mutual bank. Young woman Tabeleng Kotsi has led us and led many professionals to cracking it open in the space that is extractive, which is locked up. It's a 5 trillion rand institution, this banking institution, but you still have the big 4, the big 5, and only now 4 mutual banks in the country operating therein, whereas you need quite a lot of people coming in and cracking this system. So this is just but one example, typically, of what we mean by an extractive nature of the economic system. This talks to mining, this talks to all other types of systems. We have a government that we call our own, who are supposed, in my view, just talking about this part of a sector, which is banking, they're supposed to give 10 commercial licenses to Black people who are able, who have got skills and expertise, and say, hey, well, here is it, because this is a backbone of economy. I'm just program director giving an example of what we mean by extractive, and which therefore calls for young people, Black people in particular, to participate scientifically with meaning and understand how to crack open this extractive economic system. Lastly, leadership. I think we have got a serious leadership problem when it comes to particularly political leadership, because politician by definition is supposed to be an activist and somebody who carries the aspirations of ordinary people and who is not corruptible and who's supposed to move carrying the altruistic agenda that should make sure that every person that they represent really gain access to the things that matter a lot as it comes in particular to this topic. So now you've got a lot of political people who are business people who get co-opted into the very same extractive economic system. And guess what? They are never going to be agents of change, those people. Why? Because it doesn't serve their interests anymore. So therefore, what do? We've got a self-perpetuating extractive economic and other type of systems in our society which cannot be changed. So I just want to end it there as my opening remarks, Pagatwai.
It's muting and unmuting is a bit too difficult. Thank you very much, Nonkos. I think we're going to have quite a lively session. But in order to make sure that we don't focus on one thing only, number one, I want to encourage participants. I've seen that some participants have already started making comments on the comment section, either of the app here. I hope can also pick up some comments on Facebook, so that they'll help me ask more intelligent questions to the panelists. But I think before we get too carried away in blaming other people, I want us to reflect on what we ourselves have done to be where we are. As a point of reflection, if you see the picture in my background here, that picture is the tallest pot plant in the world. That tallest pot plant, I come from Groundville. I live in Groundville. I am in Groundville right now. It's called Groundville. So I think Manyo said he comes from Mandane, so he should easily know where Groundville is. This pot plant, those are remaining chimneys that used to be a sugar mill that was started long ago by Africans who lived in Groundville. Now, this sugar mill was run by Africans. Just to give a bit of background, Chief Lutuli, Chief Albert Lutuli, the first African Nobel Peace Prize winner, who was also president of the ANC for the second longest period after Oliver Tambo. was when he became chief of Groundfield. One of the things that seized his chieftaincy was people's access to land, because as the apartheid government was getting more and more entrenched, it was taking more and more land, which was supplying sugarcane to this sugar mill that was that had been started by Africans. It was run by Africans, but apartheid government also managed to make sure that sugar mill is wrested away from those Africans. Now, even the land, the farming land, that's where Chief Lutuli was fighting both sides. And he was not fighting as a shareholder in the sugar mill. He was fighting to make sure that sugar mill remains owned by Africans. So the issues of radical economic transformation are not new things. They were there, they were wrestled away from us. I think I wanted to put that in perspective. That's the first issue that I wanted to put up. The second issue that I wanted to put up before we get to carry it away is the fact that we keep criticizing ourselves. When I say ourselves, I'm saying ourselves because I think 2 out of 3 of the panelists have said that they are activists. We are activists, we are voters. We elect people to parliament. We say to them, go and make laws that will make sure that we address the injustices of the past. Now, when we say that 27 years later, we're not seeing much change, I want to pose this question first, saying, what is wrong? What is not making the change? But I think I want us to address that as we address the question that have also been raised because we've got to give respect to the museum that invited us to be here. There are a number of issues that they've raised. What mechanisms are in place to ensure that the reforms happen? Why are we harking back to RTP when we have NTP and all that? But I think I just want the panelists again, with these thoughts in mind, I'm not trying to restrict you. I'm just trying to give you some of the thoughts that you can address as you articulate your own views. Say, let us also please try and get towards the script that our hosts have invited us to sort of gravitate towards. Now, I will not be prescriptive. I will ask that, but let's try and keep our discussion to 5 minutes, because unfortunately I have to leave. I have to join another meeting at 12 o'clock. So I do not know, our starting latest has really taken up a bit of our time, and I'll try not to talk a lot myself. So I don't know whether Nonkosi, I should start with you. Give you a chance, give you a first bite at some of the issues that I'm raising and the museum has raised.
Thank you, Pakatwayo. Maybe just on the issues that, first of all, we must not simply sound like we're pessimistic, because we're not. There is a very tremendous amount of work that has been done for the past 2.5 decades. And we must be appreciative and ensure that we give credit to where credit is due. Government has done quite a bit, but we are going to continue agitating for them to do more and to do better as our public representatives. But at the same time, we are going to look at the private sector, because that's where extractive nature of system exists. Because when you look at the inclusive nature of political system, you will have a party that has got 2 people in parliament, but shouting the loudest and is being heard as if it's a majority. That is the inclusiveness of our political system. But when it comes to the extractiveness of our economic system, you have a very suppressive state. I mean, you still tell me, Mngoni, I'll just have 2 points and then give over to other panelists. You still tell me, Mngoni, that we're still talking about 30% of the jobs on government, whatever tenders being given to Black people. And yet, Black people, they form over 90% of the population of this country. I mean, talking Black across all demography, but Africans in particular, over 81% of them form part, but we're still begging for that 30% from the government that should be able to put their foot down and say 70%, as an example. Then we'll cry about all these things. No, people must be gradually getting there and be integrated, and you know, it must be taught as if we're children. You know, so that is one area which we must agitate for real change to happen in that particular space. And that is why I highlighted the issue of the banking sector as an example, to say we're almost 60 million now, 59 to be precise. And you go to Kenya with a population of over 45 million people, where you've got so many banking licenses are there as an example, but we're dilly-dallying because the protectors of the banking system will ensure that there's not much competition that is happening there, and you name it, and all of that. But I want to highlight just one thing on the policy front, which I saw on our concept note. Why are we changing from one policy to the next? And whilst we're still dealing with the NDP or RDP, and then there's an NDP, I believe there ought to be always the evolution of policy and ensure that it continues to adapt to the new environment, etc. But when it comes to the confusion of leadership that I highlighted as my third point on the opening remarks, I want to bring you just quickly to the confusion as to where it comes from, what I mean by that. And again, I'm saying this as a precursor. This is not bashing to the ruling party or politicians, but this is talking about the system. We have got the same political party that is ruling in the country, which has come up with a beautiful piece called the National Development Plan. And it has been an inclusive, collaborative work of art, in my view, that would ensure that, you know, everybody from opposition to the other, they are coming together to do this. And therefore, they come up with a vision that they believe it's a vision of the country. But the same vision is criticized, for instance, an example by our former president, Thabo Mbeki, from the same party, who says South Africa doesn't have a vision at the moment. And then we are told from the same political party, different signals are sent to us as the ordinary people to say, we don't have a vision, let's start afresh again. We keep coming up with different sets of documents after the other, and arguing as well as to whether this is right or not, etc. It shows for me, at least where I sit, that the confusion that we have in the leadership that leads our country. This talks to even about all other policy framework where there will be disagreement and arguments, but at the higher level, to that which is supposed to be the Bible for us as a country, that's where the confusion comes in. I'll end it there, Program Director, as I allow my other fellow panelists.
Mngoni, you're muted.
Mam Velasa, because Unongosi, no Manyosi tend to have a relationship. I think I have to get to Mam Velasa to give an opportunity in between to dilute their views.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with what Ubaba Xaba is saying. You know, that it's not all doom and gloom, but a lot more has to happen. You know, and I think a lot more will happen if, as a country, as a people, as men and women and young people, you know, really, you know, come together for the nation building project. Because if you come together, we, you know, then embrace our nationness, you know, embrace our Blackness, embrace our entitlement to the economy, you know, and also embrace our position of disadvantage. Hello?
Sorry to interrupt you, Mamvelas. I think, sorry to interrupt you, because of being shown also on Facebook. My request that you turn your camera on.
Turn my camera on.
When you speak.
Okay.
Yeah, when you speak, yes.
Oh, okay. Let me see. That is well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I mean, so I was saying that I agree with what Xaba is saying, that, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. We have the, the policy and legal and constitutional infrastructure, and although we can't really, sort of think, those are panacea for a change. I mean, they have, their own limitations, because really when you look at our constitution and where we are today, my take, it is good, but maybe we celebrated it before we implemented it, because I was quite young at the time, but I know that we began to celebrate the Constitution in 1996, and looking back now as an adult, one is thinking that, how do you quite celebrate something that has not been implemented? Was this Constitution speaking, to the whole nation as we understood it prior to 1994, or the Constitution was speaking to the nation, after 1994? And I think that's, a conversation that we need to have, and don't pretend, as if issues are not there with the Constitution, and I think, bringing things up to the surface is an act of nation building, because it brings us together. It builds a relationship, and, also address it, this animosity between the state and the people that we are seeing. Yeah, and I agree with beautiful policies, and plans, that we put forward. But then I think as a society, as a people, we have responsibility, because South Africa is a state. South Africa is not government, and if it is a state, it means the government is responsible, so is parliament, but also the people, within the people who are citizens of South Africa have a responsibility, because from where I'm seated, if the policy is good, that policy should be implementable. If the policy is good and it is not implementable, maybe that policy was not designed with the full understanding of the environment within which it has to be, developed. And I think our responsibility as intellectuals and as business people who are championing things.
I'm sorry, I left you.
You're cutting me. Mr. Gumede?
Sorry, I'm the last. I see that your network is giving you a problem, so I'll excuse you. You can switch off your camera, because it looks like your camera. Yes, please continue.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I was talking about the policies that they are good, but if they are not implementable, maybe there's something about the environment. Maybe there's a non-alignment between the policy and the environment within which they ought to be implemented. And I was saying that we have a responsibility then as scholars and intellectuals, and business people who are on the ground, to try and build the environment, that is going to make the policies to be implementable, or influence the state, such that the policies that are implementing are informed by the realities on the ground, so that we have the ground up approach in policy making, so that policies are implementable, because it doesn't help us to say we celebrate good policies if they are not changing people's lives. And also, like at a bigger, higher level, we have to acknowledge that, I mean, we adopted the neoliberal economic path after we had developed the National Development Plan. One is we're working, in government, and one has to be honest, in a way to say, the National Development Plan was developed from a social democratic, perspective. It's not a completely, a social or a welfare state, but it was something in the middle, and with the neoliberal agenda and gear, things changed somewhat, And from where I'm seated, things, change mainly in the economic side of things, and we did not adapt, to say, now the rules of the games have changed. How do we then, adapt so that, the neoliberal agenda as it is, because I don't think there was a way of avoiding it, given that we were liberated after, the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and also as part of, building the nation, we have to be honest about some of the things so that we work to see change. For an example, BEE. BEE comes from a good heart. You cannot litigate, you cannot challenge non-compliance, to BEE. Of course, you punish businesses that are not complying, but from where I'm seated, that has not necessarily worked, right? A particular race and a particular class are still leading the economy. Then it comes to quotas that are allocated to women. It was 30% on public procurement, for an example. It has now gone up to 40%. That as well is not legislated. It just have, the cabinet approval. Then it comes with goodwill. Then you also have to look at, where, there's compliance to BEE and then, gender quotas, what is being shared, and I want to propose to suggest to the panelists that I think we get the crumbs, right? Like in the, the value chain, of, provision of services, we get the crumbs, So in a situation where, there's BE in building the car, for an example, we'll probably, get, to put, tires, right? And I think that has to change because, that basically means that even those that are able to participate in the economy, they are not getting, the fair share of the work. Then it comes to women and gender, because we see that most of the women who are in business, either doing business with the state and doing business with the private sector, we are engaging in businesses that are more domesticated in a way, businesses that speak to our gender roles as women, roles that are not natural, but roles that are defined by society. The bulk of the women who were doing business with the state, for an example, were in catering, right, and providing social services. So even before COVID-19 hit, those businesses were struggling, because government, with the austerity measures, you wouldn't cater for a day's meeting, so those, so there was already like a considerable cut in the services that are concentrated in women, and it's even worse with COVID-19, at this time, for an example. Then you get a situation where, you have it on paper, but it's not quite implementable. There are a lot of opportunities that have been created by COVID-19, but women are still getting crumbs. I mean, for an example, if you were to procure masks for a department, women would participate, but they would be sewing the mask for a well-established, business that would buy from them and then sell to the state or to the private sector, with huge markups, and women do not get anything. And also what happens if the economy is dwindling like it is at this time, what we see is that most males will then take jobs that are meant for women. And you'll be horrified if I tell you that procurement of masks, for an example, the sewing of masks, most of it is now done by men, because they scramble for resources, and men are getting, into these, duties, businesses that were, led by women. I mean, you'll even see like in contracting of cleaning staff, for an example. I mean, in hotel, in government and in private sector, it was mainly women who were doing the mob, and those were job opportunities for women who are semi-skilled and not skilled, and those who are, basically starting up. But nowadays, you'll find a male mopping a hotel lobby. You'll find a male, mopping the offices, because there's now competition for jobs, and men are taking, women's jobs. And basically what I'm saying is that we have a duty to make sure that the policies and, that are there work, and that duty does not lie with the state. It lies with us as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks. It's quite a mouthful, really. But unfortunately, because of time, I will have to, not because people are not saying what is important, but just trying to keep time and also give other participants a chance. Manyos, before you come in the chat here, a number of issues have been raised, and I will ask that you touch on whatever you can touch on. Mr. S. Mazibugo has asked us a number of questions, which include amending the constitution for land reform, using infrastructure development program to stimulate growth, empowering small businesses, and then looking at what mechanism do we have for high impact structural reforms in the country, and then re-imaging planning towards the post-COVID-19 economy. It's quite a number of questions. So we can select one or two of them and address them in also articulating, in addressing the issues that other panelists have been addressing. I know that they've been addressed quite a lot, so I want to give you a slightly different angle. Thank you. Manyos.
Thank you so much, Phakathwayo. In fact, Nami, I didn't want to really go over what my fellow panelists have gone over. It's they're very, very critical points at which you just need to digest. Before I can offer my own opinion based on the current discussion as well as the key points raised as a question. Just to go back to the Khalelo Ubaba Umnguni, as if or we're criticizing the people that are in government, but unfortunately, Phakathwayo, we cannot offer a framework of evaluation, which I personally feel like it's one thing that as a country or normal as citizens, we really do need to ask ourselves, what other forms of or normal ways do we truly evaluate what has been promised? Unfortunately, the only form of evaluation, personally, from my own perspective, protests in the community, when property to see ukuthi service wasn't delivered. And another form of evaluation that I personally see is 4 years after, who is being elected back. And unfortunately, in our case, we've seen whoever is elected back, by the way, it represents another sort of like faction or whatever, or it's a group of people even within that particular party, or normally at some point you see another political party coming up. Now they are coming with another perspective or another way of thinking that they are promising now, but if we get into power, we're going to do A, B, and C, and D. It's unfortunate that with such a great constitution as Velase has alliterated, and as well as Xaba has mentioned, we have such great policies in place. But in order for us to see to it that we do get that a way of people to have that equality of access to all these benefits or normal these things that are of so human rights to us, we have to firstly go back to what has been done and how effective has it been. It's unfortunate that every single time you come forth and as an evaluator, an assessor, you come as if you are politically offering a viewpoint that is different to those that are in power, regardless of whatever. I mean, going just down into the local sphere that we are at, Ngomasipala, for instance, can you ask yourself how many surveys have been published that we as the community actually receive that says umasipala has a service delivery evaluation survey at which Tina as the community can say, yes, we have received A, B, and C. Yes, we've received amanzi kangaka. Yes, we've received all of these things. But unfortunately, the only time where you see evaluation is when people go in the streets and have to burn things. Oh, shuti khona imfuna banazo. We just saw a few days ago in between Port Shepstone and Durban, abantu bevala umgwaqo. Usuyabona futhi yini bafunani, they need water and all of those things. So in order for us to actually have a way forward, we really need to go back and look back. So looking at what Ubaba Mazibuga has mentioned, I mean, I mean, we could go to the discussion land expropriation without compensation, and really ask yourself what we are born and how often have you seen many blocking such a discussion to have ukuthi ubona ngempela ukuthi is it possible to amend the constitution ngendlela okwenzeka ngayo, because unfortunately these policies and all these discussions are very valuable to intellectuals and people that are understanding. But have you ever even asked ukuthi ugogo lo osemakhaya kwaSithembu, ugogo lo osemakhaya eNdulinde, does she understand with what even this policy means to her esemakhaya elapho? Because I do believe ukuthi ukrafta kwakho konke lokho kusigavunishayo was in mind to assist those people that are in the rural of the most rural areas. But unfortunately, iy'kole ziyakhiwa kuyakhiwa ama-clinic, but to be honest, we really need to ask who is the main benefit, or who is the key beneficiary, or who's supposedly to receive all of these things. So yes, we can talk about empowering small businesses and BEE and all of those things. Kuyiqiniso ukuthi kuzokhulunywa at an upper level and discuss kupronyiswe kuqala mhlambe financial year or even towards a particular election season. Kuzokhuluma so haphazardly and easily and so prominently. But unfortunately, if we do not have an evaluating system at which on the ground up, are they receiving the essentials? Are they getting the necessary access as much as everybody else? And hence, that's why we're finding such a big gap and a divide between class when it comes to receiving and accessing the basic human rights. Because we look at the sustainable global human ngizothi izinto ebeyihlosela ukuthi as abantu sikwazi ukuyithola, and you ask yourselves at the ground, could you really say we are proud to say we are having the same levels of access? So I do believe ukuthi njengoba besho bafowethu ukuthi nonetheless all the policies are great and all of those things, but in essence, if we do not have an evaluating system from the ground, lo umuntu ophila every day, and he or she says ukuthi ngempela I am seeing such things being spoken of, I'm feeling them every single day, impilo yami ngiyayibona iyashintsha. But if akakenzeki lutho.
Thank you very much, Manyos. Before we go to the next round of topics, I just want to raise one or two issues. Number one, unfortunately, I think looking at your pictures here, I think I'm the oldest in this forum. If you look at this economy before 1994, and you look at it now, I think it has grown tremendously. If I remember well, the budget around 1994 was around 400 billion. It is now 10 times more than that. It's about 4, oh no, the GDP, not the budget. GDP is now 4 trillion. So what I'm then asking is that the economy has grown from that, it's grown 10 times. But in growing 10 times, it has grown for the same people. In fact, many new businesses that didn't exist before 1994. Let's leave the extractive economy that Nonkosi, Mama Velasi talk about. Talk about things like Ncome. Ncome is hardly 15 years old. Talk about discovery. Talk about outsurance. You talk about some of the private hospitals that you see coming up. I live in the Lembe area called Alpelito Hospital here. It's a new hospital. Got shopping centers coming up all over the place. Now, all those people all these developments do not happen in space. Somebody gives them a permit to do it. And that person happens to be the government that we elect to run our lives. And then we go around and we complain that we're excluded from the economy. Because I'll give another example again. In the late 90s, Minister Mthembu was appointed as Minister of Minerals and Energy. Said, hey, no, this is a very complex sector. You can't interfere with it because it's going to affect the economy. She came up and said, look, as from this date, without 26% black shareholding, we are not in business. We are not going to get a license. And what happened? Both the energy sector and the mineral sector did find ways to accommodate that. Whether it's working well or not, that's another issue. But what I'm saying is that with all these other things that have happened in the economy, couldn't we have been at saying that, for example, we want to start a shopping center, want to build a shopping center, then you must have at least 60% black shareholding, full stop. Not this thing of saying, no, we're going to have black people having shops where they can sell crafts and all that. I can see that. No, but talk about participating in the real cake. But anyway, it's just a thought that I want to leave with you as I give you, because I think we are now, but as we do that, we also need to be addressing the issues that our hosts have asked us to address. And our hosts have also spoken about corruption, which has engulfed our nation. And they've also spoken about the informal sector and SMMEs. And I think to add to what Masbo has spoken about, how do we, for example, restructure even the infrastructure development programs? Is the Amatela Ngobona method the way to do it? Or should the government be coming up with a better way, not the 30% way, with a better way of saying that we want to spend R1 trillion on infrastructure development, but in spending that R1 trillion, we want to see this percentage, not of people being added as an afterthought, but of people coming in as partners to say, we're here bidding for this business. And we're looking for a much higher percentage than 30% anyway, because 30% is like an afterthought that says, please think for those, and it becomes even a pricing issue. But ladies first. We are now on corruption, SMMEs, infrastructure, and then the last one that we'll address will be the museums and cultural institutions.
Okay, let me start with SMMEs. And I agree with you, because you are saying, there is money in the economy. There is economic development. I mean, it's just that it does not get to black people, if I may put it that way. And I agree with your assertion that economic participation has to be regulated and enforced. You know, you look at the phenomenon of mega cities, for an example, the shopping malls in the townships, that has destroyed informal economy, the tuck shops, and also that has destroyed the social fiber, you know, you know, the solidarity that you see in the communities, you know, in the sense that people will go to a tuck shop, whether they have money or not, you know, and they will get what they need. And that builds a relationship, you know, in the community whilst keeping money in the community, you know, because the mega cities, they are financed by social grants, because it's people who earn social grants who are, you know, buying there. And instead of investing that money in the township economy, you know, then it goes to capital, you know. And also you would know that the mega cities, they are highly subsidized. They do not pay for water, they hardly pay for electricity, and before they are built, there's a lot of infrastructure that we pay for as citizens, you know, the roads that would go there, traffic lights, and all of that. You know, so that has to change. You know, they have to be seen in the context of community development, you know, and not capitalist development. Yeah, then corruption, it is a big issue because it destroys the relationship between the state and the people. You know, then you see the so-called civil service delivery protests, you know, and you also see people not coming with the solutions because they do not trust the state. You know, and I think you have a duty, you know, in particular the institution like this one, you know, to try and rebuild that relationship. You know, and there's also, like in where I come from, where I grew up in Mlazi, you know, what I see is that, you know, there is no relationship between the middle classes and the poor, you know, because I take the middle classes as enlightened, like with all the, you know, the problems that, you know, comes with it. Is that as middle class people, you say you see the upsurge of private hospitals, for an example. And that basically means we're no longer using public hospitals, you know, and therefore it's the poor who are using public hospitals, and the poor are not going to have political clout to hold the system accountable. You know, because now I have a medical aid and I don't go to Prince Mshieni to say, you know, this and this and this is not going well, you know, and we want it changed, you know. So that kills the social fiber, you know, and one wants to call the middle classes to say, you know, use your, you know, the power that you have to change the situation on the ground. Do not run away from the township. If you cannot live in the township, be active in the township committees, you know, so that you challenge, you know, you channel the anger, you know, and the energy that young people in the communities have, you know, because they burn things, they organize this, you know, these strikes because they have the energy, you know, they have the solutions, that the solutions are misplaced, you know. So you go in there, you know, and you work with them to say, you are sitting in this meeting, you've been organizing a protest for the whole week, you know, how about doing something positive, right? How about finding solutions that are going, you know, to work, you know, so that you are building the country, you are building the state, you know, but you are also channeling the energies. I mean, Zakhele spoke about, you know, young people, you know, unemployment not being there. We know that the National Youth Development Policy, it gives incentives to businesses and companies that are hiring young people. It gives them tax incentives. You know, but this is the information that is not on the ground. So instead of toying, you know, why don't we take responsibility and go to the Durban Chamber of Commerce and other chambers to educate them about, you know, this policy and entice them, you know, to use the policy because their returns would be greater if they apply, you know, the policy, you know, and get young people, you know, to go and speak about what business should be doing rather than them, you know, toying and breaking things. You know, so I think that's what, you know, needs to happen, an alliance between the social classes so that energies are channeled into making things work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mbelasa. Manyos. You are next on the issue.
In the next 2 seconds, Ngoni, I strongly agree with Mama Umvelasi. In fact, angazi why umkhipha kithi because she's basically uhamba nathi. So I strongly agree with this. Ukuthi, essentially, to be able to, you awukwazi ukukhanda ibhayisikili kumuntu ongakwazi ukugibela ibhayisikili. Fanele uqale uyobuza yena qala ukuthi udinga ibhayisikili lakho ukuthi mase improve kanjani. So whatever policies that you need to be improving for small business and cooperatives and informal enterprises, you can't take imall njenge mega city njengoba desho uMvelasi uyakhele abantu abahluphekile and then ulanda amabhizinisi angaphandle ukuthi wozani nizodayisela labantu la. You're not effectively impacting the economy in any way. There is supposed to be this inclusivity that is needed, especially for us who sikwazi ukuba ne-progress. Ngidwebile nje la phansi ukuthi kufike kube abantu la, kufike kube i-private sector on this one side, and then ngaphakathi kufanele kube uhulumeni who's supposed to be advocating for abantu. But unfortunately, in some cases, you see ukuthi unfortunately this doesn't take place. Uthola ukuthi the private sector ibona abagcine bebenefita kakhulu. I mean, sengigcina nje ngangibuza ukuthi why is it that every time ubona imall entsha yakhiwayo, you see the same stores? You see about Clicks, you see about Discam, you see about Pick and Pay, you see about Checkers. It's the same brands over and over and over again with every single place. So njengoba kade usho nawe Mvela Nguni ukuthi yes, kuqinisile ngokwe GDP South Africa has really improved since 1994, but eqinisweni kuukuthi ku-improve kakhulu for some, and for others it's still a very big struggle. So as much as we may amend initiatives such as the Black BEE and all of these initiatives, I mean, we talk about these policies all the time, but it still benefits those that are much more closer to it. The man on the ground still doesn't get anything. So mina personally, if I would really encourage people to encourage normal visionaries like such that we have in this panel to instigate to enforce more social and economical teachings when it comes to abantu bekuma communities abo. Yabo, if we come together, this is our motto as Amandla Omnotho. We are stronger together than divided. But obviously, if seen ndawonye, we need to be trained. We need to change our mindsets. We need to be readjusted, because at some point we were promised freedom, but essentially this had now been seen as something more of to be politically free. You can ungakwazi ukukhetha umuntu omfunayo, but lo muntu omfunayo essentially umcontrola kangakanani ukuthi akwenzele lento oyifunayo, or ukumkhetheni kwakho kungaki okutholayo wena back. How many things can you really say? I mean, we still really struggling around this issue, land reform and all of those things, and land expropriation without compensation. I mean, at some point, kwenzekile, but on paper kwenzekile, but essentially, how many black farmers do we get abasuppliela the same mega city enakunjani eMlazi? Is there a policy that is there that says to Pick and Pay when uzothenga ikabishi elu 50,000 tons eMlazi? Are we seeing all of these things taking place? So essentially, we unfortunately, as the sort of the leaders in those industries, need to come back to the community and say, but Bagiti, let us come together, let us teach you what does it really mean? Lawyer X law, Oshaya 4 years every single year. I mean, every other 4 years. That how could you properly make it effective for nina ninonke? Essentially, even the political parties essentially we do not need them. Because we were trained, we are coming together and we are being developed with economy. And for us to even understand what does it mean to say we want a part of it. I-method yamadela ngokubona may be wrong, but essentially the mindset of it or the effectiveness of it is needed. all lama companies that we are seeing erecting structures, erecting factories all around us, we do need to ask, how much are you giving back to us as the community? How much are you really empowering? How much of our young people are you hiring and all of those things? So essentially, at some point, but it's unfortunate that at some point because we may burn that structure. But essentially, even further. And this gap, this equality gap that is between these classes, the unemployed, the poverty-driven, continuously in our country is continually expanding every single time, and yet we still stuck with the policies and the promises that remain. So I do believe we need to go back to the people, group them together, teach them what does it mean to get into the scale of providing the necessary necessities, the necessary productions at which we need as a people. So you understand the futhi le idea of cooperatives, it was an idea strictly from that was originally from us as Africans. Tina, you literally grew a child as a village, but nowadays, so every man for himself. So we really need to go back to the basics at which sasikhule ngazo as ama-Afrika ukuthi besikwenza konke ndawonye. So we need to come back, we need to take back the power from the politicians, and we need to do things indlela yethu.
Thank you very much, Manu. Nongozi, you have followed some very eloquent and informed comments here.
Baka Twayo,
Yeah.
enebandla, mina ngizalwa udina abantu umakata ndashinga kazizinja zodlani bese zalwa yena umkhulu wami uNkulungu umdidu nohlonze ke bese zalwa uDakwa umpondo okaSilonjana umpondo ke okaSilonjana walwa lapha yana eSandlwane wabeka phansi amahawu wabamba imkhonto emibili wadla bafo waba nenhlanhla ukuthi abuye njengomunye wamaqhawe kaZulu abongwe ukuthi ulwile. Why am I citing this during this very important topic, program director? It's because I want to highlight one thing to our people, that economy is warfare. And I always say that the battle did not end in Ncome or Esandlwane, but it merely moved to the boardroom. That's a new battlefield. Now, for weak minds, whether they are in the political arena or in societies or business arena, they are not going to win this battle because within it, there's an element of greed. And capitalism, within it, there's an element of greed. People tend not to be too altruistic except by certain laws that are going to force them to be altruistic and start looking at how can they help the society. This we can debate and talk about. We've seen it with the involvement of the corporate governance laws, where P started being observed just over a decade ago, people, planet, and profits, whereas in the past, the approach would always be profits. So I want to just touch briefly on some very key things that you've mentioned, the issue of corruption. I want to tie it up to corruption and co-option. We must mention that the system is still white and privileged. And by the way, of the less than 5 million whites in this country, not even all whites are really making it, but a few whites who continue to sit on top of this privilege and perpetuate it. But how then they do corruption themselves? Because corruption shouldn't be looked at as just a black thing, as normally is a narrative that is driven through media. It is widespread. Corruption and co-option happens like this. I'm a politician, I am fiery, I'm doing all the things that needs to be done. All of a sudden, Mr. Van der Merwe co-ops me and put me in this company and I own shares. And I become a gatekeeper. And I ensure that I therefore fight all his battles indirectly without me, or even with me knowing that, for as long as I'm comfortable with my own family and I'm able to therefore stand in and become a gatekeeper, and I therefore fight all other Black people who want to be part of the system. That's co-option and corruption twins. So, which talks to their white privilege and all things necessary, right? So, second last, Mr. Moderator, you know, there's financial apartheid, which is the fact. And at times I tend to be resentful of politicians who are now gonna go towards elections. These are people who come to us with their hand in cap and being very, meek. And once we've elected them, they become big-headed. We can't even reach to them. I've highlighted somewhere on other social media that we can't even go to these people with our ideas as to what needs to be done because they're so high up there, but they will be becoming meek very soon and coming to us only to be self-enriching. I want to be scathing on that deliberately and without being apologetic, because these are things that we experience. It's no longer even a question of white versus Black, but it's Black versus Black, just like we have seen with the issue as a Boulders shopping mall, where that Black man was really fighting another Black man on account of his attire. So you've said something about the issue of malls and all of that. I won't dwell much into that. My colleagues have already touched on it. You see, there is new companies that have come. You've mentioned their names, beautiful. But it's because those companies are driven by the very same people who are privileged, and therefore the financial system supports them. Even the government, which is ours, supports them because generally they may not be very perceptive in looking at those things. A food for thought, just before my last point. China took out over 700 million people within 40 years of their policy of ensuring that China becomes an independent country as it is. And we know they've got 1.4 billion people. They've done tremendous amount of work. And we've put in 20 million people on the safety net in terms of social grants, right? So think about that in terms of what exactly are we doing? Was the same people we've put in there, we therefore need to depend on the base that is so small and shrinking, which is soon going to dictate to us as to what needs to be done. We've already started doing that. And then through the option that I spoke about. And I'm not by any means saying Black people should not be part of the system and own shares, etc. But you find that it's a warfare, as I initially mentioned, which has to do with ensuring that you disarm them, get some among them who are going to be ensuring that gatekeeping continues, and they are going to be the ones fighting their own to say, don't come, because it's about share of market. Lastly, Chair, productive versus consumption, the equation with two angles, where we need to drive our people. Now, pragmatically, this is what I'm trying to offer as a solution. We need to drive our people towards the productive side of economic activity, okay? What do I mean by that? Practically, this, I mean, we speak about all these policies that are beautiful on paper, but never there practically on the ground. And the NDP, PGDPs, IPAPs, National Policy Action Plan, Agricultural Policy Action Plan, agri-parks, local economic development policies, all those types of things. They're nice, they're beautiful, they are there. So what we need to do now, just like the young people that I see here are part of the panelists who are advocating for this, let's drive education, but let's make sure that we move our people from survivalist type of economic activity to the mainstream, real economic activity when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? Means of production, entrepreneurship is the key driver. People have entrepreneurial spirit that is being hampered by many things, which we do not have time even to talk about here. But I'll just cite 4 things and then end, Program Director. we need to make sure that we are pragmatic this time around. We've got the cannabis. Namhlanje, barriers to entry are being raised deliberately by the private sector who are driving government. There's words by the former president who said you can't say you are ruling when you do not have the economic power. It is true. You know, imali yathengisa uJesu uJudas wayithatha akekho umuntu ongayithengwa imali, but udinga abantu aba altruistic and who look beyond themselves and their immediate families to drive the economy of this country and to help this country to transform. So this cannabis thing is a typical example of what we are missing as an opportunity. Utu gogo umantshangase no mamkwena uzoyithatha 25,000 rand in the same government wethu ovumelayo ukuthi kube khona ama-consultants avela ko-Australia ko-America azoman asirule athi akwenziwe ukuthi nokuthi kuze kube ne-protectionism bese bethatha uGugulethu oyi-politician bamdlodle phakathi ahlale naye bese yalwa-ke nabakubo ukuthi bangangeni bazodlela i-share of market ngoba ugreed. So and bese kuba the issue of leather works. This is the last, Chair, before you chase me off the podium. Bese kuba leather works. We import 300 million pairs of shoes in this country. I always say that, and it's stats that's out there. That accounts for over 70% of what we wear and many other things. We keep exporting that. But let's look at that and just capture 30% of that economy. Because capturing 30% of that economy, do you know what it's going to do to the economy? It's going to shoot it right up because the entire value chain will be exploited. President was talking about 1.1 trillion rand, maybe during the first time of the COVID, that we sort of spend annually in imports. Because this is the thing. I mean, if we're to target 30% of that, look at how much our GDP is going to go, as well as the real practical impact that that growth will bring about if we start being thinking people and acting people. Moderator, these are things that I think, and many, many others, I've mentioned the banks issue. Just 2 sectors, 3 sectors, you'll see tremendous change right across the length and breadth of our country. We're a very small country to be talking about, singing about poverty, unemployment, inequality. It's a song that is going to be sung once again during elections, after elections. What are we doing with the political power in our hands? We're doing absolute zilch.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very thought-provoking, very challenging. Nonkosi, I think we've really hit the nail on the head. We are doing absolute zilch. I think Mthembu no Sonchikazi also mentioned that the minute we become, should I say, middle class, we then drift away from people. I think Mthembu made an example of Prince Msheni Hospital. I was living in Umlazi when Prince Msheni Hospital opened. It was a beautiful modern hospital, very well run. And they were even training nurses there. Beautiful hospital. Now, in fact, we got ill as residents of Umlazi. We got ill and we went to Msheni. Now, I can't go to Msheni because it's been poorly run. But there's one example I know of Professor Gumede, who after retiring from being a principal of the University of Zululand, she went and became a manager of Prince Msheni Hospital. She tried her best, but I think the route was too deep and she was a bit too old to turn it all around. But anyway, I think those are very thought-provoking thoughts, but I think what becomes of it is that it's us. We can't be blaming people too much about it. It's us who need to make sure that these things happen, especially the younger ones. It's up to you to make sure that these things happen. It's your future that we, older people, are messing up. So it's up to you to really clean it up. Clean it up in an orderly fashion, but make sure that it ends up giving you the economy that you want. I think as a parting shot, this would be very quick because I know most of you are not very well versed in this. as you know, we are invited by a cultural institution and museum to participate in this. And they put in as a last question there that how can cultural institutions like this contribute to economic transformation, economic recovery, and all that. As I mentioned in my introduction, I was a member of the council of this museum. In fact, I thought that they had forgotten about me. I was surprised when they called me asking me to come and moderate this seminar. I was also a member of the council of the Lutuli Museum here in Groundville. So I know a bit about museums. I know what they can do. Museums are those organizations that are totally run by the Department of Arts and Culture. They are provided almost 100% budget by the Department of Arts and Culture to then come and be part of the community. The only thing that they are very prominent on at the moment is that they employ people like Umatungwana and the people who are hosting us today. At least from that side, it does give jobs. But I do not know how many of you have been to Ncome Museum. Ncome Museum is a beautiful, beautiful infrastructure across the Ncome River, or they call it now Blood River, in the deep rural area of Mutu. What can that museum do to contribute to the economic development of Mutu? I don't want us to spend too much time because, as I say, you can spend about 3 minutes each, and then, or 2 minutes each, and then we'll hand back to Mthembu, our host. Thank you. Anyone can start. Mantulans on Ncome.
Xaba, let me just go at it very quickly. From a creative perspective, Mnguni, tourism. I personally feel like it's tourism and ukufundisa. Heritage has to be one of our strongest competitive advantages as a country, especially as a province as well. I mean, look at what was happening during the short course, how much interest it raised from other cultures as well as other countries all over the world. Tourism has to be the strongest form of a competitive advantage and our unique selling point as a province. So ama institutions njenge le museum nami sengizofanele ngifake i-application yokuthi simarket, because I didn't know too much about it until ngaze nga research after the invitation. So we need to know more about these institutions because iwona bamba amagugu amakhulu ethu njengesizwe sakaZulu ekufanele sidle ngawo. Sesibona amabhasi ehla enyuka, amabhasi ama-tourists asuka phesheya and all over the country. So on tourism, I think a lot of business comes from there. Usisi Umvelase ubalile omama abenza izinto crafts work, storytelling, and all of these things. There is a tremendous role that they can play in the economy, locally as well as provincially as well as nationally.
Thank you. Mvelase. Mvelase, this is one of our cultural institutions. Okay, it looks like I don't see any participants anyway. So, numbers.
Hi.
Okay, she's there.
Oh.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi. Okay, yeah. I mean, my parting shot and what I think is the the role or the contribution of your institution in this. The National Development Project program or plan is a program of the nation. It's a plan of the nation. So as we build the nation from the cultural and amagugu perspective, you know, it has to be part of it. And I mean, of course, our culture, our identity, and our beautiful bodies, you know, bring, you know, tourism. People want to come and see the richness of our culture, you know, but at the same time, I personally feel sad, you know, if people say KwaZulu-Natal, for an example, is a tourist destination. You know, this is not a tourist destination. Izwe labo babamkhulu leli, which we treasure, you know. So for me, you do that because everything has been capitalized, but also you use the institution to build our dignity as a people, the pride. Because if you have the dignity, you look for solutions. If you do not have dignity and you have nothing to lose and you don't have that cultural, deep-seated identity, you distract. You know, and for me, it even starts in the families. You know, you observe that, you know, in the families where there is conflict, where there is no sense of identity, where there is taratana and other things, that family tends not to develop, like at a micro family level, because they do not assist each other with paying university fees with that child yaban and that child yaban. You know, so you need the unity, you need the dignity. You know, you want communities, families, and the nation to come together. You want the dignity, you know, the pride of being Zulu or Xhosa or whatever, you know, to bind you so that you do that which is right for your nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Lungos.
I've read quite a lot of books that talks to other races writing about us, learning from our ancestors in terms of how to wage war, even in the boardroom. I would like to present something that has always been my hope and vision, that at some point, institutions like this one, Ncome, should do. I agree fully with my two colleagues, but I want to offer this and say, if you look at ubuqhawe bethu, amaZulu, amaXhosa nabonke, but speaking especially as an example, ile yaseNcome, why singa-contribute kwi-economy ngokuthi annually kube khona uhambo lwabantu abasha bafundiswe, let them be taught and walk the footsteps of their great-grandfathers and grandmothers to understand and fortify their minds against the warfare of economy, so that they can get out and really do something, understanding ukuthi culturally they possess this treasure, because this is a treasure that we have. These are the shoulders on which we stand, of our forebears, of our forefathers. Isilo sabadukuza, si understand ukuthi sasilwa kanjani. There's a book called Secret of Izicwe, omunye udokotela wabelungu oyibhalile, and nama no Robert Greene labhale khona 33 Strategies of War, amongst many books. These are books that will teach you about a strategy senkosi isilo sakaDukuza uShaka when he was attacking, including isilo sasondini inkosi uCetshwayo, and as an example. Other people, they see value and treasure in what we don't think about, and then they extract lessons out of that. Why don't we have this annual walk through type journeys, pilgrimages, which have to do with ukufundisa abantu bakithi, especially young people. I mean, what we saw in Midrand is typical of the lost elderly man who is supposed to have known that this is umuntu wakithi who's priding himself of wearing the traditional gear. So there's a lot more that these institutions can do, but I want to submit this in particular to say it is important that there ought to be teachings which are even going to be more aligned to the economy, because our forefathers fought for the economy in those places. And they even said, when installing young people who were 12 years, 15 years, but in case we don't come back, you shall continue. because siyolwela izwe lokhokho beni okuyizwe lethu namhlanje esinganalo ngenxa ukuthi sisalindile silinda abantu kufanele kushaya umthetho kubuyizwe asinalo. But again, it is important for us to teach young people in particular because ibona abantu senethemba kubona. But it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Some of us, and maybe those who are older, it's going to be difficult to change their minds. Key thing is let's invest on young people to be able to do better than us.
Thank you, Nonkosi. Thank you. I think as a parting shot on this one, because I think Nonkosi has talked about war a lot. In my Facebook post on 16 December, I quoted a book by, so it's a book with a lot of writers. It's called Being Zulu or Zulu Identities. But in that book, I quoted what the ANC MK said about December 16 and Ncome. It says it was not by accident that we launched MK on December 16th. White South Africa observes that day as a time of militant might over our people. The violence that they celebrate is the violence of the minority, aimed at subjugating the majority of the people of our country. It is a celebration of injustice and inhumanity of man against man. We chose that day to show how different we are. We celebrate December 16, our Heroes' Day, to underline our commitment that we are waging a just pursuit of freedom, justice, and peace. On that note, I want to say the war is on for economic freedom. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to our host. I want to thank our host for giving us this opportunity to air our ideas. And I want to thank you, panelists, for being such a wonderful panel. I think I've learned a lot from you. It's a pity I'm too old to implement some of the things that you guys are talking about. But thank you very much. Mthembu, it's back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mnguni. I'm going to quickly turn this over now to my colleague, my counterpart in Msunduzi and Pietermaritzburg, Mr. Rob Late, to pass the vote of thanks on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkunu, and wonderful to see the panelists, and Mr. Gumede, very nice to see you again. As Mr. Mkunu has said, it's really my task to really thank the panelists for their involvement. As we know, we've been live on Facebook, and it's going to be up on Facebook for people to see. And so we really do appreciate your very interesting engagement with one another. And so really on behalf of Msunduzi Museum, very big thanks to Mr. Gumede, our moderator, and to our panel members, Mr. Mbatha, Ms. Mthembu, and Mr. Xaba. I think we've had a really very inspiring morning together. And our team who put together the actual work behind the scenes here, Mrs. Sewell and Ms. Keys. Thank you very much for your hard works. And just finally, perhaps as we end that, thank you, Mr. Mkunu from Ncome Museum, for your effort in making sure that the program took place. And to end off, I think the quote from Mr. Mandela concerning human rights would be fitting. To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. And so perhaps may I leave you on that note and wish you a very good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I hope that we'll be able to catch up. I know that I can catch up with Nonkosi. It's very provocative. And through you, Nonkosi, I can also get to Manyosi. And thank you. Mamvelas, Aslan Alim Kakoi. Thank you very much. and bye-bye.
Thank you so much.